That's all right. Members, it's actually just a little after 7:15, so I think we will start, please, if we can. And welcome everybody to this meeting of the Local Plan Subcommittee. I have a few apologies, but just to welcome those of you who've not been on this particular committee before. It's very nice to see you. I have got apologies actually from councillors Abbott, Coleridge, Ritchie and Walsh. Everybody else who should be here is here.
Councillor Martin is missing, but I haven't had apologies from
Right. Councillor Martin, Alison has just reminded me, is not here. We haven't heard from him, so whether he's just running a bit late. She's running a bit late, I don't know. Just a reminder as well that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded and is also available to see on the Council's YouTube channel. Right. Declarations of interest, members. Does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest they need to declare this evening? Yes, Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Madam Chairman, just for the sake of transparency, Bradford Street Conservation Area is part of my division as an Essex County Councillor, but I will stay and vote on it.
Okay, fine, thank you. Nobody else? No? Okay.
And Chairman, on consistency,
yes.
matters relating to Braintree Town Centre, as it's in my county division at Essex County Council.
Fine. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Minutes of the previous meeting. The last meeting was on the 30th of March, which was a few months ago. Just as a reminder for those who were here, the items discussed were health and wellbeing impact assessment, sustainability guidance note, Angling Water Resources Management Plan 2024 and Angling Water Storm Overflow Report 2023. Does anybody have anything they want to raise? Otherwise, can we approve the minutes of that meeting? Thank you. Right, we'll move on, members, to item 4, public question time. We do have one speaker this evening, Councillor David Holland, who is the ward member for Stour Valley South Ward and has a statement to make on the National Grid Norwich to Tilbury item. Good evening, Councillor Holland, and welcome. You have up to 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. My comments this evening relate to this Council's response to National Grid's Norwich to Tilbury pylon line proposals. Specifically, they relate to the issues of wellbeing and socio-economic impacts. Having read the papers for this evening's meeting as they relate to these proposals, I feel the issue of public wellbeing is not adequately covered. It is clear that detriment to natural beauty as a result of the imposition of alien structures in natural landscapes delivers detriment to public well-being. This is evidenced in part by the level of outpouring of concern by our residents against National Grid's proposals across all media forms. Detriment to public well-being is not only a detriment in its own right, it also delivers a negative impact on residents' mental health. It has been established that detriment to public well-being reveals itself in cost to the public purse for health and social care. It is also worth noting that a Queen's Bench Division judgment a decade ago held that worry about health impacts from electrical infrastructure is itself a health impact that should be considered in making planning decisions. This clearly links to impacts on well-being. Concern about public well-being, therefore, is a key issue that should, in my view, be covered in this Council's response to National Grid. We should also highlight the cost impacts to the public purse, in my view. Consideration of these socialised costs should, I believe, be added to the other socio-economic costs which are covered in your proposed response. There's one other detail issue that I would like to suggest you consider. Section 3.10 of the draft response addresses the need for underground cabling, which is proposed within designated landscape. Here, the method by which undergrounding is achieved is key to avoiding cutting an unnatural swathe across existing woodland and decimating its natural and protected beauty. I would like to suggest this council specifically advocates horizontal directional drilling, or HDD, as the appropriate method for traversing woodland, as this avoids such an amenity impact. This also relates to sections 5.2 and 5.3 of the draft response. I hope from the points that I've made, you feel that option 5.2 is the appropriate decision to make this evening, such that these concerns can form part of Braintree District Council's response to National Grid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holland, for your statement. What I will do is when we reach that item on the agenda, I will ask officers if they have any comments to make. All right. I've got it. I've got a draft of it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Right, members, we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, Bradford Street Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan. The report's going to be presented by Julie, and I'd also just like this evening to welcome Laura Johnson from Place Services, who's here for actually the first 2 items on the agenda. Julie, well, actually, I don't know who's going. Julie, are you going first? Yep, okay.
Thank you. The Planning and Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990. Sorry. The Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990 requires that conservation areas are reviewed from time to time, and today committee is considering both the Bradford Street and the Braintree Town Centre appraisals. These are part of a number of reviews conducted during the past few years, and others include Great Barfield, Fearing and Kelvedon. Before we start, I would like to draw to committee's attention 3 matters with regard to the committee report. The first is at paragraph 4.3, and there the second last sentence should be deleted.
Excuse me, is that the one, General? Is that the one this separation reflects?
No, it would, however, be still considered
Oh, right, second that.
second.
Well, that's the
Is
last.
that right?
So it's the last sentence.
No, there's one after that.
Not in mine.
Yeah, one of the areas to be removed. Have you got that?
Oh, I see, yes, sorry, beg your pardon. Right. Thank you.
Okay, fine.
The second item is paragraph 4.4. Sentence 1 should be deleted and replaced with Bradford Street is considered as one character area. And if committee is ready, the third matter is paragraph 4.6, where Bocking should be replaced with Bradford Street.
So it should say Braintree and Bradford Street conservation areas?
That's
Is that
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Okay. The local planning authority shall from time to time determine which parts of their area are of special architectural or historic interest, the character of which or appearance of which it is desirable to preserve or enhance. The review of the conservation areas are from time to time, no more specific than that, and to determine any of the parts or further parts of the area that should be designated. The NPP elaborates by saying that when designating these areas, authorities should ensure that the area justifies such status because of its special architectural or historic interests. The NPPF glossary and planning practice guidance elaborates on what historic interest, archaeological interest and architectural or artistic interest might comprise. And it does go into some detail. But to précis it, historic interest pertains to past lives and events, and built form can provide a record of the nation's history and the collective experiences of a place for the community, which can symbolise wider values such as faith and cultural identity. For example, you might want churches and mosques and other places of religious importance which have that architectural value and historic value. Architectural interest obviously is to do with the aesthetics of place and perhaps the arts and science of the design, methods of construction, etc. And the setting is important as well. Setting is the surroundings in which the asset is experienced, whether that's a listed building or a conservation area. It's not a designation in itself. You would not allocate a setting, but it is judged on a case-by-case basis. It can change over time. It can influence how the asset is experienced. For example, there may be a particularly poor design next to it, which when removed might enhance the setting and allow more views to the setting. So development can change the nature of the setting. The Bradford Street appraisal covers such subjects as history, evolution of the conservation area, assessment of its significance in terms of the built environment, such as listed buildings, open space, views, building materials and the like. Also included is heritage at risk, although Braintree does not have any buildings that are on the at-risk register, and that is good. Looks at archaeological potential as well, and particularly with the Braintree town centre conservation area, there is some of that there.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but whether I'm deaf, I'm finding it very hard to hear what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Judy, could you up your volume a bit, please? Or put your, yes, if you bring, yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
And the document also looks at opportunities for enhancement and looks at management proposals. I can hear it. I can hear the volume now. Right. The slide shows the additions and removals from the conservation area. We have additions at Church Lane, Rivermead, and there's the Folly and Green Space at Area D. We have as removals Area B at Broad Road and Elizabeth Lockhart Way, Williams Drive area, and the former Little Bradford's grounds. These are the removals are largely to do with modern development at the edge of the conservation area boundary, where we would want to remove those areas, because the architectural and historic interest isn't sufficient in those areas. We are required to hold a public meeting, and that was held during remotely under the COVID arrangements, and all persons in the conservation area, those to be removed and those to be included, were notified and invited to the meeting and asked if they wanted to be informed of this meeting. We have had 21 responses, and the main themes included the very strong themes relating to traffic and parking problems. A lot of historical information was offered for inclusion, and sometimes facts queried. Comments regarding poor repair and the need for advice for householders was raised. There were no strong objections to the splitting of the conservation areas, and there was a desire for improvements to be made, and a few suggestions as to how this might occur, from improving the piazza at the junction with Church Lane, imposing Article 4 directions, greening the streets, and making floorscape improvements. But many do relate to improving the highway, and especially for pedestrian safety. And there were suggestions of listing more buildings as well. And there were some queries relating to specific boundary alterations. The details of the representations and officer response can be found in Appendix 2A of the committee agenda. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Julie, very much. I do think it's a really good document. Actually, I enjoyed reading through it, and I did say to Office earlier that actually, having read it about a week ago, and I've been in and out of Causeway House a few times since then, and as I've driven through, it's actually made me pay attention to some of the features, particularly those highlighted, and how really attractive that area is. There are some really beautiful buildings which I think I've numerous times have driven past and not necessarily paid a great deal of attention to, but I certainly am now. So I will open it up for any questions, either to Julie or to Laura, who is here. Anybody like to make a comment or ask a question at all? Anybody? Yes, Councillor Parker.
No, I just would like to say, commend all the work that's gone into producing this. I think it really is first class, and it was, as you say, Chairman, very interesting to read through. It seems to me quite sensible, although I'm not a ward member representing Braintree. It seems to be quite sensible to split Braintree Town from Bradford Street, given the different historical, they've got different historical lots of origin, if you like. And also, I think I was pleased to see the inclusion of Church Lane in the Bradford Street conservation area. But yes, super work and very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Mrs Bowles-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Whoever is responsible for writing this article should give themselves a massive pat on the back. It's absolutely amazing. And if it was you, Laura, well done. I I was astounded at it, to be honest with you, and the detail in it, it's absolutely excellent. And hopefully people who have read that read and see the importance of Bradford Street. And I think that's us as a district council, it's important that we preserve that Bradford Street, because there's not much in the district that is so like this, so close to the town. And I'm sure the people of Bradford Street will be pleased to see this. The biggest complaint that I have consistently as county member is the traffic and the parking. And it is difficult, and what we've got to remember is that when these buildings were built, there were horses and carts, there was no traffic. The people are so concerned in Bradford Street of the damage that's being done to their properties when they're so close to the road as well. And I understand that concern as well, because the amount of traffic that actually does go through Bradford Street now is horrendous, really, for the size of road it is. And then, of course, you get people parking on one side of the road, and that creates all sorts of problems and road rage and everything else. County are looking at one particular spot at the moment of parking where we do have an issue and it becomes a danger, and they're looking at putting some bollards up at the minute, which I think is the best solution we can have. We also have a problem, and this is fors and against, is the cobblestones that go across the driveways of people using mobility aids are struggling. Because, to be fair, you struggle when you walk over them, let alone if you're in a mobility aid with wheels, so it is difficult. So that is of concern, but hopefully we can try and resolve that issue as well. But to the people who have brought this forward and wrote it, any part of it, I commend you, and I'm more than happy, Madam Chairman, to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Balsford. Does that find a seconder? Well, thank you, Councillor Parker. And yes, I absolutely agree. It makes sense to me to separate Bradford Street and Braintree Town Centre in terms of the appraisal. And I noticed there were no very strong objections. I don't think there were any from anybody to do that. So if nobody else has, oh yes, Councillor Finken.
Flint. Would it be possible for the District Council to consider further signage in the area to direct people to the historical interest of the conservation area?
Interesting point. Yes, Laura.
Of course, I guess it's something that would always be looked at. It's something I guess we'd have to find funding for, and we'd want the right interpretation boards to go up and all sorts of things. In terms of planning permission, and we'd have to sort that out as well. Informational signs. I know there is one on Bradford Street already, but it probably could do with a bit more upkeep and a bit more attention. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just on that point, Councillor Finken most probably isn't aware, because obviously it's not his ward, but there are some Braintree and Bocking members who are giving some of their community grant over to have blue plaques put on some of the buildings, which will be another good thing for them, and we're doing that in line with what has been requested. We won't be able to afford to do them all, because I think it's quite a large sum, but we will be able to afford to do many of them. So yeah, and I can ask highways, because obviously signage is highways is county, and I can ask them, but I guess Laura will know what my answer will be, and so do I. But we can ask, because it is a heritage place. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think we will certainly take that point away. Councillor Parker.
Yes, I was going to raise this bit later on as it's being brought up now. Actually, I had written down in my notes blue plaques as well, so it was, we're all thinking alike. I mean, the other thing that sort of occurred to me is that the work that's been done is so interesting. I was wondering whether a little exhibition in the Braintree Museum of the heritage of the town and Bradford Street would be of something that might be worth considering.
Good, yeah, nice idea. Yes, we'll take that one away as well. Yeah, I think that would be well worth considering. Good. All right. If no one else has any comments, it has been moved and seconded. The recommendation is on page 5, which is that we approve the Bradford Street Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan for use as a material consideration when Braintree District Council carries out its planning functions, and including the addition and removal of parts of the conservation area as set out. All those in favour, please. Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Right, we can move on to item 6, which is the Braintree Town Centre Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan. And it's back to Laura again, I think. And Julie, you're going to start.
The legislative background and government advice apply equally to this character appraisal, so I won't go through that again. This appraisal covers similar areas. So you've got the history and evaluation, the assessment of significance, heritage risk and archaeological potential. And with the archaeological potential, I believe that towards the lower areas there may be some potential there. Opportunities for enhancement and management proposals are also included within the documents. There are boundary alterations again. We've got the addition of area at Rain Road, London Road, Knockley Road, Woodfield Road, Victoria Street and Mount Road, St Peter in the Fields and nearby dwellings. Areas for removal are at George Yard, the council offices area, and east and west of Area E and Coggeshall Road. And again, these areas relate to parts of the former conservation area that don't have the sufficient archaeological or historical interest to be retained. Another matter to draw to attention is that in the document which was subject to public consultation, it showed a terrace to the south side of St Michael's Road, opposite St Michael's Church, to be removed from the conservation area, and that this was a mapping error, and this should be shown as being retained, just to make that clear. The conservation area is divided into the 6 areas, and each is examined individually for its significance and described again in terms, similar terms to those in the Bradford Street conservation area, and yeah. Again, we conducted the public consultation at the same time as Bradford Street. We received 7 responses, and we did receive some support for including Victoria Street, some concern about inclusion of Woodfield Road area. There was concern, a member of the public thought that we were removing Braintree and Bocking Public Gardens from conservation area protection, but they have gone to the Bradford Street protection. There was a request to include the cricket grounds. Again, that is allocated in the local plan for recreation, and it doesn't have sufficient architectural or historic interest in itself to be included. We had some cynicism that the council wished to build on the land, and some representations that relate to issues that are not to do with the matters that we're looking at. They relate to town centre issues such as the pedestrianisation scheme details, past advice given on plastic windows and rubbish, concerns over rubbish, and wiring as well. These are issues which, to some extent, have been addressed by other means, and the officer response to these issues are given in Appendix 1. And that's the finish of the presentation.
Thanks, Julie. Another very good document. Seems quite well received. I noticed there was some consternation from at least one or two responses about this building not being included, but I do understand the reasons for that. But yes, one or two people were a bit concerned that it was being removed because we were going to build all over it. But there we are. That's not for this discussion. Members, any comments from anybody on this one? Yes, Councillor Cunningham.
No, just very briefly to add to what you've just said, Chairman. Thank you. I think it's an excellent piece of work, and I think for the last 5 years, perhaps maybe too much of Braintree Town Centre has been behind building hoardings, or there's been roadworks around various bits and pieces, and that's formed a bit of a distraction. You sometimes actually forget the rich heritage and the remarkable architecture that's in this old wool market town, and actually I think it's very gratifying to all of us from this part of the world to actually see the sort of the heritage assets and the real historical feel of the town presented in such an excellent way. So I think it's an excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. I agree. There are some really lovely drawings and photographs in the document. Yeah. Anybody else? Any comments at all? Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, like Councillor Cunningham has said, we see these buildings every day, so we actually do kind of take them for granted. But when they're put in an article like this, that actually draws your attention to it. So, again, I think it's an excellent report, and I'm happy to move officers' recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes-Flint, does that find a seconder anywhere? Yes, Councillor Cunningham, thank you. Laura, just before I move on, any comment from you at all? Anything you want to add?
No, thank you for the comments. I think the lady at the back has a question, though.
We
You're not
don't.
interested in that? Yeah, fine.
Well, we don't normally. Go on. What would you like to ask something?
They're not taken out of the conservation area. There's no.
They're staying in.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Happy about that one? Yeah. Good.
Oh, yeah, actually, Julie's just reminded me there's been an extension because we've added in St Peter's in the Fields, the church behind, and that road. So it's actually got a bit bigger round there, round the back. Okay?
Thanks for clarifying that. Right. Okay, members, recommendation on page 82. The wording is exactly the same as for the previous item, except that it's for Braintree Town Centre Conservation Area. It's been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, we now...
Chairman, I'm sorry to just before you move on to the next item, I'm sorry, I should have declared at the start a non-pecuniary interest in this item as the portfolio holder at Essex County Council with responsibility for the planning function. I will, however, stay and listen to the report if that's okay, because the actual response at Essex County Council to this issue will be taken through a special lead member at the County Council reporting directly to the leader. So it would not be the councillor directly responding to this from Essex County Council. So I think it's perfectly acceptable. I stay here and hear any Braintree response to the issue. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you for that, Councillor Cunningham. Thank you. So, members, item 7, which is the Norwich to Tilbury, formerly known as East Anglia Green, grid reinforcement consultation, June 2023. And this is going to be taken by Alan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spray. So, National Grid are proposing to build a new set of transmission infrastructure between Norwich to Tilbury. It's part of a project. It's recently rebranded to the Great Grid Upgrade. And as Councillor Spray has previously said, it used to be referred to as the East Anglia Green Enablement Project. So this project is defined as a nationally significant infrastructure project. And that basically means a project for high voltage power lines that are over 2 kilometres in length, and they are and over 132 kilovolts in capacity. These projects are considered by the government to be so big and very nationally important that permission to build them needs to be given at a national level rather than national level by the responsible minister. So instead of applying for a planning permission to the local authority, developers apply to the planning inspectorate for a different type of permission called a development consent order, or DCO for short. Members may recall responding to a similar consultation in June of last year. This current consultation is what's known as a second non-statutory consultation. It is different to the previous consultation, as now it shows positions of things like where the line is more likely to be and the position of pylons. And it also shows the location of some or potential location for some ceiling end compounds in the district where it is required to cross under an existing kilovolt line. The slide up on the screen at the moment, that's just showing what the existing network is in the region. The orange circles show the Sizewell Generation Group and the Essex Coast Generation Group. So these are areas where a large number of renewable energy projects have been granted permission, and the Sizewell is obviously with the nuclear plant over at Sizewell. So these are all the different options. So so there are a number of different options there. So in terms of the routes, so the initial strategic options analysis has been used to test assumptions and any interim conclusions that have been made at the previous statutory consultation stage. This is concluded, or the interim conclusion is that EAN4, the overhead line, which is a little bit tricky to see on the PowerPoint. I apologise for that, members. So that's the Norwich to Bramford and EAS2 overhead line, Bramford to a new substation at Tilbury. They've also talked about the potential for looking at SCD1/C-Link, which is a link between Sizewell to Richborough down in Kent. So that is what they're looking at as their interim preference for the route. It's stated that this will be kept under review. So the consultation considered the option of an undersea route in a little bit more detail. Previously there wasn't much detail reported, and that's contained within the strategic options back check and review document. It does commit to further information on that option, or a potential sea-link option being consulted on later. So that is still very much potentially in play. So to respond to the consultation, officers have commissioned Wynne William Associates to provide landscape advice, place services to provide advice on arboricultural, ecological and built heritage, and Wardell Armstrong to provide advice on geology, air quality, noise and vibration. They've all produced technical notes, which are included in the report from page 201, and they will be obviously sent across as part of this consultation response in full. So to briefly summarise some of the key points from our technical notes, so for landscape, it's noted that the preferred pylon route had minimal changes to it, but we've suggested that some additional viewpoints should be included in the detailed assessment of the routes, taking into consideration public rights of way in the area. For agricultural comments, so no tree constraints have yet been identified. This could be an issue in respect of proximity to trees. Bear with me, I've skipped. Next slide, please. So my laptop is a little bit temperamental. There we go. So this slide here is just showing, I should touch on this a little bit earlier, the actual route through the district, and it is the central line, green line with the red dots on it, and the dots represent where pylons potentially are. So as I was saying, so there's no actual detailed information on the agricultural side of things yet. And for ecology, it's noted that the undergrounding route appears to have relatively careful consideration. So if we zoom in to here, what you're seeing here is there are two orange rectangles. These are potential locations for sealing end compounds. The red line connecting them is where an undergrounding section would be, and it is set out in the document that to get from one to the other, they would be proposing to use a trenchless technique, which we obviously support that, because the dotted line down the middle is one of our protected lanes, and it's quite one of the nicer ones, I think, because it has quite a lot of features in terms of it's got sort of the historical raised banks, hedges, some veteran trees in there. Although by all means, not a complete protected lane, but it is quite a nice one. But just to conclude on the ecology point, they do need to include wildlife sites in their assessment as a non-statutory designation. Built heritage, again, that lacks detail beyond any sort of general themes and issues, but we expect that that detailed information would be available at the next consultation. And for air quality, geology, hydrology, and noise and vibrations, there are no specific issues to raise at this time. In addition to this, officers have raised concerns in respect of tourism, and we've also highlighted the potential impact on protected lanes. The pylons do cross some other protected lanes within the district, so we would need those to be carefully considered. So, once this consultation has concluded, the indicative timetable shows that a statutory consultation will take place in late 2023 or early 2024. This is when we would expect to see the majority of the detailed information that we're referring to in our response. That's when we'll see the specific impacts, hopefully on individual buildings, trees, that sort of thing. And it's anticipated that once that consultation has been concluded, then the development consent application will be submitted in 2025 with an examination in 2025-2026. And if it's approved, then they'll be looking at construction from 2027 with a fully operational scheme by 2031. And just to finish off, the proposal response letter is set out in Appendix 1. Would you like me to address Councillor Holland's points?
Yes, if you could just come back on Councillor Holland's points. Thank you. Okay. So, in terms of the impact on wellbeing, our response does include at para 3.1. So we obviously have an in-principle objection to the proposal as set out, but we do refer to the need for, bear with me 1 second, is it 3.1? We do make, 3.1, we make a reference to the impact on the environment, economic, and impact on residents. So we have considered that. The previous consultation response did highlight concerns that some residents had about the proximity of high voltage power lines. Officers have met with National Grid on that subject, and there hasn't been, to sum it up, there isn't any sort of specific evidence that says that there is any kind of health impact. Although obviously you wouldn't want to go and hug a power line for too long. There are there are magnetic emissions from them, but it's relatively low. And I'd say for the government recently finished a consultation on looking at the wider benefits or potential community enhancements for high voltage power line proposals. So currently landowners, they get a payment, sort of an easement payment, so they get a bit of compensation for having power lines over their land, but the government consulting on whether there should be some either more direct payments to local residents for those impacts, or depending on how close they live to a pylon or how far away, or whether there should be some sort of wider community benefit approach, where they'll be looking at community projects that might help the economy, society, or the environment in general. Don't have an ETA on when that consultation will be, when the results of that consultation will be announced yet. I believe it only finished in June. And I
think. Yeah, and I did touch on the undergrounding point earlier. So obviously, we can only really comment on the parts within Braintree District, I think. And there's only one point within the district where it is going to be undergrounding, and they are proposing to do trenchless. Can't say that. Trenchless trench. No, yes, I know what I mean. Apologies. Okay, I think that's everything.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Good report. Thank you. I'll open it up for discussion. I'll just say I noticed this morning, well, I think I knew this was coming, that we are expecting something from the government tomorrow, I think from Grant Shapps, on proposals to speed up improvements to the UK's power grid, including recommendations on streamlining the planning process, they're calling it, for infrastructure, in particular pylons and substations. And to quote from the piece I read this morning, the aim being to halve the amount of time it takes to get these connections going. And I think we all, we recognise why National Grid need to do this, and there's also the Bramford Twinstead NSIP as well. It's just the method around it, but I'm just aware that I think we are going to get something tomorrow saying that the planning process needs to be faster, which is fine as long as it's not going to cut short or deny people the opportunity for response and consultation, and as long as we feel that officers have sufficient time to pull together evidence and responses that we want to give. Anyway, having said that, does anybody have any questions or comments, please? Stella Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a number of sort of small comments really on the proposed response. But first of all, I just wonder whether Officer could just answer a question about the ceiling, because my understanding was from attending the previous consultation with National Grid was that there was some talk about a ceiling, which I thought was going to, people were proposing there should be a direct link from the wind farms, which are literally in the middle of the North Sea, to London. But I may have got that, I may be getting muddled up with two different things. I wonder if you just answer that question.
Yeah, I think the issue with the undergrounding is it does have to go, the undersea route is I don't think you can directly link it from a wind farm to a destination a certain distance away without touching the coastline. So I don't think you would be able to do, with the current technology available, you would be able to do a direct link to it. National Grid have set out quite a compelling case as to the need for the reinforcement, because yes, there is a significant increase in capacity that they need to deal with, but there's also issues of network resilience as well. So they are trying to sort of resolve two issues really there, and they are arguing that the sea-link wouldn't necessarily help with wider network stability or things like that. But yeah, I mean, a direct link, that would probably keep a lot of people quite happy, but I'm not entirely sure whether or not the technology would be there to actually achieve that sort of link.
Yes, do you want to come back?
Yes, please. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure about that, because I think there is a difference between direct current and alternating current and substations and so on. But I think it's something that I certainly don't fully understand, whether it's possible to bring power directly from the wind farms to London without going via East Anglia. But that is probably, I won't pursue that any further. Just actually on the response itself, is it okay if I just go through? I had a number of comments on the paragraphs. Yeah. So, just on 1.1, which is just sort of the introductory section, we do state there that additional infrastructure is required to enable offshore wind. In this case, we understand the electricity generated by wind farms the Tarchon interconnector and future nuclear power stations. The only thing I would say is that in National Grid's own consultation, they only talk about offshore wind farms and the interconnector. They don't talk about the nuclear power stations. And it's been mentioned when we've had discussions with them, but I sort of feel that we should limit that introduction to what they say in their consultation and just take out the reference to nuclear power stations. And it may or may not be the case, but I think we should just, personally, I think we should just limit it to exactly, put the justification, the reason for it, make it exactly the same as they say in their documentation. So that's the first point. If I can move on to the next point. The other point, I think I've raised this before actually on something else, but my understanding, this is in relates to paragraph 1.2. Well, obviously we've declared a climate emergency, we have a climate change strategy and so on, but I don't recall our climate change strategy actually specifically stating we supported renewable energy production in the right places. I wonder if you could just check whether we actually say that in our strategy. If we do, obviously keep it in, but again, if it's not in there, I think we should not add stuff in that's not there. So that was that point. So moving on, if that's all right, Madam Chairman, just to there's a small point, paragraph 3.5. The authority considers it likely technical feasible to transfer electricity from the coast closer to its destination. It's not really from the coast, it's from the wind farms. So they're not actually, most of them, well certainly the ones that National Grid are talking about are not anywhere near the coast. So that was just a small point. The other point was on, sorry, am I going too fast? Is that right? 4.3, which is relating to the sort of associated impacts. I think, yes, there's a mention there for haul routes. I do know that with the Brantford to Twinstead consultation, and that there has been a huge sort of outcry, really, certainly amongst the farmers, and I think that haul roads have been put across fields are totally unnecessary and destroying basically farmland. I just wonder whether we could insert the words sort of haul routes as far as necessary. You know, I just think we should be not necessarily accepting haul routes unless if it's possible to use the road network. I appreciate lots of protected lanes and so on. It might not be possible, etc. But I think, you know, National Grid just finds it easy to just draw a line across the map, actually.
You'd like to strengthen that point about
yes,
the haul
yes, if that's possible. And then just really picking up on Councillor Holland's point, we obviously have a section, we've added a section about tourism, which I think is a very, very valid point and something we should include. I wonder whether, and I know the officer said about, Alan said about that reference to residents, but it literally is just sort of in that introductory paragraph. I wonder whether it's worth us just including a paragraph about the impact on residents' well-being and residential amenity, because obviously if you are living in the countryside with beautiful views and you now are going to have a pylon next to you, it is obviously going to affect your well-being to an extent, and I just think that is something that ought to be taken into account. That's all, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Parker. I'll ask Alan to come back on those. I particularly take the point on the haul routes, Bramford Twinstead haul route, which is in my ward, and yes, you're right, there has been a lot of discussion about it. And actually, I'm pleased to say that the Inspectorate have just recently written to National Grid asking them to provide further evidence for their reasoning behind that haul route before the examination for that particular scheme. So, yes, it's certainly something that is causing quite a lot of consternation. Right, let me just ask Alan to come back on the various amendments as suggested.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any particular problem with any of the amendments. We are aware that there are going to be some new. I mean, you're quite right. They do keep mentioning just the wind farms, but we are aware that there's likely to be some nuclear power station projects which will be coming online in the future. I'll double check the point on 1.2, and obviously I'll amend that paragraph so it accurately reflects what councillors previously agreed. Yes, it is actually from the wind farm, and it comes back to this AC/DC point of you needing additional facilities to convert current from one to the other. And 4.3 haul routes. It's quite difficult with the haul routes because. Apologies, I'll stop sharing my screen. But with the Sealing compound map, the closest road between those two compounds is the protected lane. So we need to be quite careful with haul routes because I think you'd probably have to come in from the east on one, which could potentially be a very long haul route, and the west you could probably come in via the from the A131 Great Lees area. So yes, that's going to need some potential very careful consideration, I think, as to what would need to be done on that. I'm happy to add some an additional line or two on residential impact for amenity side of things. So yeah, I'll be quite happy to come up with some wording for that. And
Okay, good, thank you. I think we don't know, or do we, the exact route of the haul roads yet?
No.
So I think that is something that will obviously come up in detail further down the line. So there would be an opportunity, I assume, then for us to, if we think there's a real issue with them, to say something on that. That's fine. And my understanding about the undersea issue is that I think it does. Yes, it does have to touch land at various points. From my memory from previous consultations that I logged into, that was made quite clear. I am overall, I'm pleased with our response here. I think it's quite robust. I mean, we are saying that we have serious concerns about the whole project and its impact on the landscape, in particular with the number of pylons they're proposing. And we also, I think, make the point quite strongly that we don't believe they have explored the undersea option sufficiently, if at all. The only comment I keep hearing from them is, well, it's all too expensive. But they haven't actually produced, sufficient evidence to say that or to demonstrate that. So I'm happy that I think our response is good, but yes, Alan, if officers are happy to make those amendments as suggested by Councillor Parker, that's fine. Does anybody else have any other comments to add? Nope. Right. I think I don't think I have anything else to say except we need to just we'll watch out for whatever comes out from the government tomorrow. I mean, this one is well underway, as is the Bramford Twinstead one. But we know these schemes need to happen, but it's the method that is giving everybody quite a lot of concern. Right, members. The recommendation is on point 2.1 on page 186, which is to approve the consultation response contained within Appendix 1. But we do now have some amendments. Could I have a mover, please, that we accept the report and the response, but with the suggested amendments, which officers will send to me to have a look at? Yep. Could I have a mover for that, please? Yes, Councillor Parker. And a seconder, please? Councillor Bowes-Flint. Is everybody happy with that? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. That was, I think, a good debate on that. That is the end of the agenda. We have no urgent business, no reason to exclude the public at all. So with that, I can draw the meeting to a close at 8:15. Thank you. Thank you, members.